Welcome back to Special Report. Joining us again, the Vice President of the United States, JD Vance. Pope Leo has expressed problems with the war in Iran, says that we should be peacemakers, been very vocal. The president took to Truth Social saying Leo should be thankful because, as everyone knows, he was a shocking surprise. He wasn't on any list to be pope, was only put there because the church, because he was an American, they thought he would be good, best way to deal with President Donald J. Trump. If I wasn't in the White House, Leo wouldn't be in the Vatican. Just wondering, as a Catholic, how you consider this Truth Social post, and then the post of the picture, which a lot of people took as the president posting a picture of himself as Jesus. He later said that he posted it as thinking as a doctor saving people.
I thought it was me as a doctor, and had to do with Red Cross as a Red Cross worker there, which we support, and only the fake news could come up with that one.
But it really caused a kerfuffle, Mr. Vice President. I'm just wondering what you make of all of this, and whether it's what you think of this back and forth with the church.
Well, first of all, Brett, I think the president was posting a joke, and of course he took it down because he recognized that a lot of people weren't understanding his humor in that case. I think the president of the United States likes to mix it up on social media, and I actually think that's one of the good things about this president is that he's not filtered. He doesn't send everything through a communications professional. He actually reaches out directly to the people. You know, when it comes to the disagreements with the Vatican, look, we're going to have disagreements, Brett, from time to time. I think it's a good thing, actually, that the Pope is advocating for the things that he cares about. But we're always going to have disagreements on matters of public policy, or I should say, sometimes we're going to have disagreements on matters of public policy. The Pope has been critical of our immigration policy, but ultimately the immigration policy of the United States is set by Donald Trump. The Pope is going to have disagreements on other issues. We can respect the Pope. We certainly have a good relationship with the Vatican, but we're also going to disagree on substantive questions from time to time. I think that's a totally reasonable thing. It isn't particularly newsworthy.
Do you think that when the president says it's hurting him very badly, catering to the radical left, it's hurting the Catholic Church, do you agree with the president there?
Well, look, I think the president has the prerogative to set American foreign policy. He's got the prerogative to set American immigration policy. He has to look out for the interests of the United States of America. And that inevitably means that when the Vatican comments on issues of public policy, sometimes there's going to be agreement, of course, and sometimes there's going to be disagreement. I think that's a reasonable thing, Brett. I don't think that it's particularly newsworthy, but I certainly think that in some cases it would be best for the Vatican to stick to matters of morality, to stick to matters of what's going on in the Catholic Church, and let the President of the United States stick to dictating American public policy. But when they're in conflict, they're in conflict. I don't worry about it too much, Brett. I think it's a natural thing. I'm sure it'll happen in the future, and it's not that big of a deal that it happened in the past.
Last thing, should the American people be ready for more increased prices, especially at the gas tank, considering that this does not look like it's going to resolve very quickly as far as the Strait of Hormuz?
Well, you know, the president said, Brett, that yes, gas prices are higher. Yes, energy prices are higher. First of all, they're higher from a baseline where we've never had the terrible energy prices that we had of the last administration. So we come at this from a position of strength. But, Brett, absolutely, we know the American people are hurting. That's why that we're negotiating so aggressively to try to get the energy prices to come down. We're going to keep on working at it. I do think that we're in a place where we've accomplished our objectives. We can start to wind this thing down. I'd much rather wind this thing down with a big successful negotiation. But regardless, the president said this is not going to go on forever. That's never his intention. And I think because of that, the energy prices, while painful, are not going to be around forever.
Mr. Vice President, we appreciate your time. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Brett. Take care.
Be sure to like and subscribe for all the Fox News latest on YouTube and catch full shows streaming now on Fox One.